My name's Alex River, and I'm about to tell you something that'll make you question everything you think you know about small-town justice. If you're watching Karenology, you know it's never just a simple misunderstanding. Picture this. Tuesday morning, 7:30, sharp. I'm nursing my coffee, checking security alerts on my laptop, when I hear the growl of diesel engines outside. 3 contractor trucks parked right at my fence line. The smell of exhaust mixed with pine needles filled the morning air as I watched them unload a massive wooden sign. Wildlife Protection Zone, entry prohibited by federal law. They hammered it into the ground like they owned the place. My place. I walked outside, still holding my coffee mug. "Excuse me, what's going on?" The crew chief, a stocky guy in a hard hat, barely looked up. "Federal wildlife release. Eagles got dropped here yesterday by the Rehab center. This is their territory now." Eagles? I looked up. Sure enough, 3 massive birds perched in my oak trees, watching me with those piercing yellow eyes. Beautiful creatures, no doubt about it. But nobody had asked me. That's when I saw her, Karen Wilcox from the Homeowners Association, standing at the edge of my driveway with a clipboard and that smile. You know the one. The smile that says, "I'm about to ruin your day, and I'm going to enjoy it." "Morning, Alex." She handed me an official-looking envelope. "I'm afraid we have a problem." I tore it open right there. Fine notice. $2,500 for maintaining wild animals without proper permits and community approval. Below that, a daily penalty of $200 until the violation is remedied. "Are you serious right now?" My voice came out sharper than I intended. "The community standards are very clear," Karen said, tapping her pen against the clipboard. "No exotic animals, no exceptions." I pulled out my old programmer's badge from my pocket, a nervous habit I'd picked up since the divorce. Sarah used to tell me I fidgeted with it whenever I was stressed. She was right about that. Right about a lot of things, actually. "These aren't my eagles, Karen. The Federal Wildlife Service put them here. Then you need to have them removed." She turned to walk away, then paused. "Oh, and Alex, the emergency HOA meeting is tonight, 7 o'clock. Don't be late." The crew finished installing their sign and drove off, leaving me standing in my own yard, suddenly feeling like a trespasser. The eagles watched it all happen, occasionally calling to each other in those sharp, wild voices. I spent the morning making calls. The Wildlife Rehabilitation Center confirmed they'd released the birds on my property based on federal guidelines. "Perfect habitat," the director told me. "Large trees, water access, minimal human interference. They'll probably stay for weeks, maybe months." When I explained about the HOA fine, she went quiet. "That's unusual. We coordinate with local authorities, but we've never had homeowner association pushback. Federal law supersedes local regulations." By afternoon, I had my answer, or thought I did. This was going to be a legal battle. Federal wildlife protection versus community covenants. I'd fought worse battles in court during the divorce. I could handle this. That's when Marcus Steele showed up. He knocked on my front door at exactly 4 o'clock, wearing a tailored suit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage. Everything about him screamed money. The cologne, the watch, the way he stood like he owned the sidewalk he was standing on. "Mr. River, Marcus Steele, Willowbrook Development. I understand you're having some wildlife issues." I kept the screen door between us. "What's it to you?" He smiled, but his eyes stayed cold. "We represent several property owners in this area. Wildlife infestations can be problematic for everyone's property values." "Infestations?" 3 large predatory birds. He pulled out his phone, showed me photos. My eagles, but the angles made them look menacing. Talons extended, beaks open. Aggressive behavior, property damage. We've documented everything. I looked closer at the photos. Something felt off about the timestamps, but I couldn't put my finger on it. "Here's what I'm prepared to offer," Steele continued. "Willowbrook Development will cover all your HOA fees and help facilitate the birds' relocation. Clean, simple, everyone wins." "And what do you get out of it?" His smile widened. "Community harmony, property value protection, the usual developer concerns." I was about to ask more questions when my phone buzzed. Text message from an unknown number. "Check your mailbox." Inside was another envelope, this one from my insurance company. Policy cancellation notice, effective immediately. Reason? Failure to disclose exotic animal habitation, creating liability exposure. Have you ever felt like the whole world just shifted sideways? Like you're standing in the same place, but suddenly nothing makes sense anymore? I looked back at Steele, still standing on my porch with that predator's smile. "I'll think about it," I told him. "Don't think too long," he said. "These situations have a way of escalating." As his car pulled away, I noticed the eagles had gone quiet. Even they seemed to sense that something had changed. Something told me this wasn't really about birds at all. The emergency HOA meeting that night felt like walking into an ambush. The community center buzzed with angry voices, and every head turned when I walked through the door. The air inside was thick with tension, and the lingering smell of burnt coffee from the lobby machine. I found a seat in the back, but Karen Wilcox had other plans. "Alex, why don't you come up front? This concerns you directly." 53 pairs of eyes followed me as I made my way to the front row. I caught fragments of whispered conversations: dangerous predators, property values, children at risk. Karen called the meeting to order with a sharp bang of her gavel. "We're here tonight to address the wildlife crisis at 847 Maple Street." Crisis. She actually called it a crisis. 3 large birds of prey have taken up residence, creating an immediate threat to our community's safety and property values. She clicked through a presentation on the overhead projector. More photos of my eagles, these ones even more dramatic than Steele's. "We've received reports of aggressive behavior, damaged vehicles, and destroyed landscaping." Now I stood up. "What reports? When did this happen?" "Are you questioning the validity of our documentation, Alex?" The crowd murmured disapproval. I felt my chest tighten. "I'm asking for specifics. When were these photos taken? Who filed these reports?" Karen shuffled through her papers. "Multiple residents have expressed concerns." "Names?" "Privacy concerns prevent me from—" "This is bullshit." The words came out louder than I intended. The room went dead silent. Karen's expression hardened. "Language, Alex. There are families present." Jim Collins, my next-door neighbor, raised his hand. 70-year-old Vietnam vet, usually kept to himself. "I live right next to Alex. Haven't seen any aggressive behavior from those birds. They mostly just sit in the trees." "Thank God. Finally some sanity." Jim," Karen's voice took on that patronizing tone, "with your vision problems, are you sure you're the best witness?" The room erupted, people talking over each other, pointing fingers. I heard someone shout, "What about our children?" Another voice, "Property values are already dropping." Through the chaos, I noticed Marcus Steele leaning against the back wall, watching everything with that same cold smile. He wasn't supposed to be here. HOA meetings were for residents only. Karen banged her gavel repeatedly. "Order, we need to vote on immediate action." "What kind of action?" I asked. Resolution 47B. The board moves to declare the wildlife presence a community emergency, authorizing immediate removal by any means necessary. Any means necessary. Those words hit me like ice water. I stood up again. "Federal law protects these birds. You can't just—" "Federal guidelines don't supersede community safety," Karen interrupted. "All in favor?" Hands shot up across the room. I counted quickly. 38 in favor. Opposed? Jim raised his hand. So did Mrs. Chen from Oak Street, and surprisingly, the Hendersons from 2 blocks over. 4 total. Motion carries. Alex, you have 72 hours to resolve this situation, or the association will take action. After the meeting, people filed past me without making eye contact, like I'd become toxic overnight. Steele had already vanished. Jim Collins approached me near the parking lot. Under the yellow streetlight, his weathered face looked concerned. "This doesn't feel right, Alex. I've been watching those birds for 2 days. They're not bothering anyone. Thanks for speaking up in there." He glanced around, then leaned closer. "You might want to check something. Yesterday morning around dawn, I saw photographers with telephoto lenses, professional equipment. They were taking pictures of your yard before the birds even woke up." My blood went cold. "Before they woke up?" Made a note of it because it seemed odd. Professional bird photographers usually wait for action shots, you know? These guys seemed more interested in staging something. I felt for my programmer's badge in my pocket. Sometimes the answers are hiding in plain sight, waiting for someone who knows how to look. "Jim, did you get a good look at these photographers?" "Good enough. One of them was driving a Willowbrook development truck. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop, pulling up the photos from Steele's presentation and the HOA meeting. Something about those timestamps had been bugging me all day. I opened my digital forensics toolkit, same software I use for cybersecurity investigations. Photo metadata tells a story, if you know how to read it. The first image showed an eagle with wings spread, talons extended, looking aggressive. The embedded timestamp read 6:47 a.m. Monday. But according to the Wildlife Rehabilitation Center, the eagles weren't released until 2 p.m. Monday. I pulled up more photos. Every single aggressive behavior shot was timestamped before the birds even arrived. Someone had staged this entire thing. Professional photographers, dramatic angles, perfect lighting, all of it designed to make 3 peaceful birds look like monsters. But who and why? I made myself another cup of coffee and kept digging. Property records, development permits, zoning applications. Following digital breadcrumbs was something I'd done professionally for years, tracking down cyber threats and data breaches. What I found made my hands shake. Willowbrook Development had filed preliminary paperwork for a luxury housing development, 47 acres of underutilized residential property marked for acquisition and redevelopment. My address was right in the middle of the proposed zone. The coffee mug slipped from my fingers and shattered on the kitchen floor, dark liquid spreading across the tiles like spilled blood. Outside my window, one of the eagles called to its companions, a wild, defiant sound that cut through the night silence. They weren't the real threat here. I was starting to understand what was. Wednesday morning hit me like a freight train. I'd been awake all night, diving deeper into Willowbrook's digital footprint, and what I found made the fake eagle photos look like child's play. The smell of burned coffee filled my kitchen as I stared at my laptop screen. Property acquisition records, city planning documents, environmental impact studies, all pointing to the same conclusion. My neighborhood was sitting on a gold mine, and I was the only thing standing in their way. My phone buzzed. Rita Sanchez from the Wildlife Rehabilitation Center. "Alex, we need to talk. Something's not right about your eagles." "What do you mean?" "Can you meet me at the center and bring your laptop? You mentioned you work in cybersecurity." 30 minutes later, I was sitting across from Rita in her cramped office. She was younger than I'd expected from our phone calls, maybe early 30s, with intense dark eyes and dirt under her fingernails from handling birds all morning. "The federal release paperwork for your property," she said, sliding a folder across the desk. "It's legitimate, but barely. Someone pulled strings to get those specific coordinates approved." I opened the folder. The bureaucratic language was dense, but one signature caught my attention. Dr. Elizabeth Carver, Federal Wildlife Commission. Below it, a note in different handwriting. Expedited approval requested by M.U. Steele, environmental consultant. "Marcus Steele requested this?" Rita nodded. "That's what's strange. Environmental consultants usually work to relocate wildlife away from development zones, not into them." I pulled up Steele's company profile on my laptop. Willowbrook Development's website listed him as Senior Property Acquisition Specialist and Environmental Compliance Officer, a convenient dual role. "Rita, what if someone wanted to create a federal wildlife protection zone specifically to block development?" She leaned forward. "That would be brilliant, actually. Federal wildlife habitat designations trump local zoning laws. Once an area is designated as critical habitat, development becomes nearly impossible. But that would help me, not hurt me. Unless," she said slowly, "someone planned to challenge the designation later. Claim the birds were placed illegally, that the environmental assessment was flawed." The pieces clicked into place like lines of code finally compiling. Steele hadn't just staged the aggressive photos, he'd orchestrated the entire eagle placement. Create the problem, manufacture the crisis, then position himself as the solution. "There's something else," Rita continued. "I called Dr. Carver this morning. She's been on medical leave for 6 weeks, hasn't signed any paperwork." I stared at the forged signature. How deep does this go? My phone rang, unknown number. "Mr. River, this is Channel 7 News. We understand you're harboring dangerous wildlife in a residential neighborhood. We'd like to interview you for tonight's broadcast." I hung up without answering. Within minutes, 2 more calls from local news stations. Then my insurance agent, my mortgage company, 3 neighbors asking if I was planning to move. The character assassination had gone digital. I Googled my name and address. The results made my stomach drop. Social media posts about eagle attacks in Willowbrook. Yelp reviews claiming my cybersecurity business was run by someone who endangers children. Facebook photos of my house with comments like, "This guy values birds over human safety." Every single post was created within the last 12 hours. Every profile looked fake when I dug deeper. Stock photos, minimal history, connections to other suspicious accounts. "They're burning down your reputation," Rita observed, reading over my shoulder. "Professional bot network. Someone paid serious money for this." That's when I noticed the pattern in the fake social media accounts. Geographic clustering around 3 zip codes. All areas where Willowbrook Development had active projects. The same digital signature I'd seen in corporate espionage cases. I was dealing with professionals. Rita's phone buzzed. She answered, listened for a moment, then her face went pale. That was my supervisor. Someone filed a federal complaint against our center, claims we violated protocol by releasing birds into an unsuitable habitat. She set the phone down carefully. If the investigation finds merit, we could lose our federal licensing. The room felt smaller suddenly. They weren't just coming after me, they were systematically destroying anyone who could help me. "Rita, I need you to do something that might sound crazy." "I'm listening." "Document everything. Every bird behavior, every feeding pattern, every interaction with humans. Video, timestamps, detailed notes. If this goes to court, we need proof that these eagles are exactly what they're supposed to be. Peaceful, rehabilitated wildlife." She nodded. "What are you going to do?" I pulled up Willowbrook's corporate structure on my laptop. Shell companies within shell companies, but every digital transaction leaves traces. Bank routing numbers, IP addresses, email domains. I'm going to do what I do best, follow the money. That afternoon, I set up a secure workspace in my basement. Multiple monitors, encrypted connections, forensic software that could trace financial transactions across corporate networks. The same tools I used to hunt cyber criminals. If Steele thought he could outmaneuver someone who'd spent 15 years tracking digital ghosts, he was about to learn otherwise. The first lead came from the HOA's bank records, publicly available through municipal filings. 3 large deposits in the past month, all from consulting fees paid by Meridian Holdings LLC. A quick corporate search revealed Meridian as a subsidiary of Willowbrook Development. They'd been buying votes. My phone rang again. This time, I recognized the number. "Alex, it's Jim Collins. You need to get over here, now." "What's wrong?" "Someone spray-painted bird killer across your garage door, and there's a crowd gathering." Through my basement window, I could see the flicker of flashlights and hear the murmur of angry voices. The digital attack had gone physical. I grabbed my programmer's badge from the desk, rubbing it between my fingers. Sarah used to say I was most dangerous when I was cornered. She was right about that, too. Time to find out just how far Willowbrook was willing to push this game. The crowd outside my house had grown to maybe 20 people by the time I walked up from the basement. The acrid smell of fresh spray paint mixed with the evening air as neighbors I'd known for 5 years stood on my lawn holding flashlights and cell phones. "There he is!" someone shouted from the back. Karen Wilcox stood front and center, clipboard in hand like always. But tonight, she had backup. Marcus Steele positioned just behind her right shoulder, and 3 men I didn't recognize wearing Willowbrook Development polo shirts. "Alex, we need to talk," Karen announced loud enough for everyone to hear. "This situation has escalated beyond what anyone expected." The red paint across my garage door was still wet, dripping down like blood. Above us, the eagles sat quietly in their oak tree, watching the human drama unfold below. "Who did this?" I gestured at the graffiti. "That's not the issue," Steele interjected, stepping forward. "The issue is community safety. We've received 17 separate complaints about aggressive bird behavior just today." I pulled out my phone, opened the voice recorder app. "Names and dates of these complaints?" "Privacy laws prevent us from—" "Bullshit." I held up the phone so everyone could see I was recording. "You want to destroy my property and reputation? Do it on the record." The crowd shifted nervously. People started looking at their shoes instead of at me. Mrs. Patterson from 3 doors down raised her hand tentatively. "Alex, I saw one of those birds swoop near the Hendersons' little girl yesterday." "What time, Mrs. Patterson?" "Well, I It was sometime in the afternoon. The eagles were in my backyard all afternoon yesterday. I have security footage. I pulled up my phone's camera roll, showed the timestamp. 2:15 p.m., all three birds roosting peacefully. Mrs. Patterson's face flushed. Maybe I got the day wrong. That's when I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Half the people in this crowd weren't from my neighborhood. I recognized the Pattersons, the Johnsons, Jim Collins standing off to the side, looking uncomfortable. But the rest. Strangers holding professionally printed signs that read, "Protect our children," and "Wildlife belongs in the wild." "Excuse me," I called to a woman near the back holding one of the signs. "What's your address?" She looked panicked. I live on Elm Street." "Which house number on Elm?" Steele quickly stepped between us. "Alex, you're being hostile. We're here to help." "Help with what? A problem you created?" I pulled up my laptop files on my phone, showed the screen to the crowd. These aggressive behavior photos were taken before the eagles even arrived. Professional photographers, staged shots, all designed to make peaceful birds look dangerous. The murmur from the crowd changed tone, doubt creeping in. Karen's voice got sharp. "Are you accusing the Homeowners Association of fraud?" "I'm stating facts. Someone paid for fake social media attacks against me. Someone forged federal wildlife documents. Someone hired actors to stand on my lawn tonight." I pointed at the woman who couldn't name her address. "You want to try again? Which house on Elm Street?" She looked desperately at Steele, who was now pulling out his phone. "This conversation is over," he announced. "Alex, you have 48 hours to resolve this peacefully, or Willowbrook Development will be forced to take legal action." What kind of legal action? His smile was all predator now. Nuisance lawsuit, public endangerment, violation of community covenants, property condemnation proceedings if necessary. The words hit like physical blows. A nuisance lawsuit could drag on for years, cost me everything I had left. Property condemnation meant they could force me to sell at whatever price they deemed fair. You can't just... Actually, we can. Steele handed me a manila envelope. Preliminary injunction, filed this afternoon. You're prohibited from interfering with any wildlife removal efforts on your property. I tore open the envelope. Legal letterhead, official stamps, a judge's signature I didn't recognize. The language was dense, but the message was clear. If I tried to stop them from removing the eagles, I'd be in contempt of court. "This is dated tomorrow," I said, checking the filing date. Steele's smile widened. Administrative efficiency. The court was very understanding about the urgent nature of this public safety issue. Have you ever felt like you're drowning in paperwork, like the whole legal system just turned against you overnight? The crowd began to disperse, but I noticed several people taking photos of my house, my license plate, me standing there holding the injunction, building a case file. Jim Collins walked over after everyone else had left. His weathered face looked grim in the porch light. "Alex, this is bigger than you think. I did some asking around today." "What kind of asking around?" "My nephew works for the county planning office. Says there's been unusual activity on your block. Property assessments, soil studies, infrastructure surveys, all commissioned by the same company." "Let me guess, Willowbrook Development." "That's the thing. The paperwork says Meridian Holdings, but the crews doing the work? All Willowbrook trucks." I felt the pieces clicking together again. "They're not just trying to buy my house, Jim. They want the whole block." Gets worse. The planning office received an environmental impact study last week. Claims this entire area is unsuitable for wildlife habitat due to residential density and safety concerns. But the eagles just got here. Dated 2 weeks ago. The timeline was impossible unless someone had planned this entire sequence of events in advance. Create the wildlife habitat, manufacture the crisis, then use the crisis to justify removing the habitat protection and clearing the way for development. I looked up at the eagles, still perched peacefully in their tree. They had no idea they were pawns in someone else's game. "Jim, I need a favor. Can you keep an eye on things tomorrow? I have some research to do." "What kind of research?" I held up the injunction, studied the judge's signature more carefully. Something about it looked familiar. The kind that involves finding out who Marcus Steele really works for. That night, I didn't sleep again. I sat in my basement with every cybersecurity tool I owned, tracing corporate connections, financial transfers, and legal filings. following the digital breadcrumbs deeper into a network of shell companies and dummy corporations. What I found in the early morning hours made everything clear. Judge Patricia Morrison, who'd signed the injunction, had received a substantial campaign contribution from Morrison and Associates Legal Fund, the fund's largest donor, Meridian Holdings LLC. Marcus Steele wasn't just a property acquisition specialist. According to his LinkedIn profile, the real one, buried behind privacy settings, he was former military, specialized in complex urban development projects for Blackwater-type contractors. They'd brought in a professional, but they'd made one mistake. They'd assumed I was just another suburban homeowner who'd roll over when the pressure got too high. I wasn't just another suburban homeowner. I was someone who'd spent 15 years hunting digital predators for a living. Time to turn the tables. Thursday morning brought the sound of heavy machinery. I woke up to the rumble of diesel engines and the beep, beep, beep of trucks backing up. The smell of exhaust and fresh asphalt filled the air as I looked out my bedroom window. 3 Willowbrook development trucks were parked at the end of my driveway. Workers in hard hats were setting up what looked like a mobile command center. Tables, generators, equipment I couldn't identify from this distance. My phone was already buzzing with missed calls. Rita from the Wildlife Center, Jim Collins, numbers I didn't recognize. But the text message that made my blood freeze came from an unknown number. Stop digging or lose everything. Final warning. I grabbed my laptop and checked my secure servers. Someone had attempted to breach my network 17 times overnight. Professional-level attacks, military-grade intrusion software. They weren't just trying to intimidate me anymore. They were trying to destroy my evidence. But here's the thing about cybersecurity experts. We're paranoid by nature. Everything was backed up on encrypted drives in 3 separate locations. I called Rita first. Alex, thank God, they're here. Who's there? Federal Wildlife Enforcement. 2 agents, full badges, saying they have a warrant to remove the eagles immediately. My chest tightened. What kind of warrant? Emergency removal order. Claims the birds were illegally placed and pose an imminent public safety threat. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Alex, these guys aren't regular wildlife agents. They're carrying equipment I've never seen before. I pulled up the Federal Wildlife Enforcement database. One of my security contracts gave me access. Searched for active removal orders in my zip code. Nothing. No warrants, no emergency orders, no official federal activity scheduled for my address. Rita, those aren't real federal agents. What? I'm looking at the federal database right now. There's no removal order, no emergency authorization, nothing. Silence on the other end, then, oh God, they're walking toward the trees with some kind of nets and tranquilizer equipment. I was already grabbing my keys. Don't let them near those birds. I'm on my way. Alex, I can't interfere with federal agents. They're not federal agents. The drive to my house from Rita's office normally took 15 minutes. I made it in 8, running 2 red lights and pushing my old Honda past any speed limit that mattered. The scene in my front yard looked like a military operation. The fake federal agents had cordoned off the area around my oak tree with yellow tape. One of them was setting up what looked like a high-powered tranquilizer rifle, while the other barked orders at Rita, who stood with her arms crossed, refusing to back down. Marcus Steele supervised everything from a folding chair, sipping coffee from a travel mug like he was watching a baseball game. I parked and walked straight to the man with the tranquilizer gun. Let me see your federal identification. He was tall, military-bearing, the kind of guy who'd been taking orders and giving them his whole life. Sir, you need to stay back. This is an active federal operation. No, it's not. I held up my phone, showed him the federal database. There's no removal order for this address, no emergency authorization, no record of any federal wildlife activity. His partner, a shorter guy with nervous eyes, moved closer. Sir, please step away from the operation area. What's your badge number? The tall one reached for something on his belt, not a badge, a weapon. Gentlemen, Steele stood up from his chair, still holding his coffee. Perhaps we should de-escalate this situation. De-escalate? I turned to face him. You hired fake federal agents to steal protected wildlife from my property. That's a serious accusation, Alex. I hope you can back it up. I could, but not here, not now, not with 2 armed men who weren't afraid to reach for their weapons in broad daylight. Rita stepped beside me. The birds aren't coming down. They're protected by federal law, and I won't let anyone harm them." The shorter fake agent laughed. "Lady, you're about to be charged with interfering with a federal operation." "Call the sheriff," I told Rita quietly. "Real law enforcement." That's when I heard the rumble. 3 more vehicles coming up the street, but these weren't Willowbrook trucks. Sheriff's Department cruisers, moving fast with no sirens. Steele's expression changed. For the first time since I'd met him, he looked worried. The lead cruiser pulled right up to my driveway. Sheriff Tom Bradley got out. A man I'd known since high school, before I left for college in the tech world. Tom had stayed local, worked his way up from deputy to sheriff over 20 years. "What's the situation here?" Tom's voice carried authority that the fake agents didn't. "Federal wildlife removal operation," the tall fake agent replied. "We have jurisdiction." Tom walked over, looked at the guy's badge. Really looked at it, the way a real cop examines identification. "This badge number doesn't exist in the federal system." "What?" "I ran your badge number before I got out of my car." Tom's hand moved to his service weapon. "Along with your partners, neither one of you are in any federal database." The fake agents looked at each other, then at Steele, who was suddenly very interested in the contents of his coffee cup. "Gentlemen, you're under arrest for impersonating federal officers." What happened next unfolded like a choreographed dance. The fake agents tried to run. Tom's deputies were waiting for them. Steele tried to get in his car, but I'd parked behind him, blocking his escape route. 20 minutes later, I was standing in my front yard watching 3 men in handcuffs getting loaded into sheriff's cruisers. The tranquilizer equipment, the nets, the fake federal paperwork, all of it evidence now. Tom walked over, shaking his head. "Alex, what the hell have you gotten yourself into?" I showed him everything. The forged documents, the fake social media attacks, the property acquisition scheme, the manufactured wildlife crisis. All of it laid out on my phone screen, like a corporate espionage case study. "This is elaborate," Tom said. "Professional level fraud. These guys weren't small-time operators." "The question is, how far up does it go?" Rita approached, looking shaken but relieved. "The Eagles are safe." "For now," I said. "But Steele's arrest doesn't stop Willowbrook development. He was just the field operative." Tom's radio crackled. He listened, then looked at me with a strange expression. "Alex, you might want to hear this. We just got word that Judge Morrison, the one who signed your injunction, has been placed under investigation by the state attorney general. Seems someone tipped them off about irregularities in her campaign finances." I couldn't help but smile. Irregularities? Unreported contributions from dummy corporations. The kind of thing that makes judges lose their jobs and injunctions get thrown out. Rita stared at me. "You did this?" "I told you I was good at following digital breadcrumbs." That evening, after the excitement died down, I sat on my back porch with a beer, watching the Eagles settle in for the night. They'd barely reacted to the commotion, just watched from their oak tree like they understood that the humans below were working out their territorial disputes. My phone rang, unknown number, but I answered it anyway. "Mr. River, this is David Chen from the State Environmental Protection Agency. We understand you've uncovered some irregularities in federal wildlife placement procedures." That's one way to put it. "We'd like to schedule a formal interview. It seems Willowbrook Development has been manipulating environmental assessments across 3 counties. Your case might be the key to a much larger investigation." After I hung up, I pulled out my old programmer's badge and looked at it in the porch light. Sarah had been wrong about one thing. I didn't fidget with it because I was stressed. I fidgeted with it because it reminded me who I was before I lost everything. Someone who solved puzzles. Someone who didn't give up when the code got complicated. Someone who was very good at making sure the bad guys didn't win. But I had a feeling this fight was just getting started. Friday brought a knock on my door at 6 a.m. I opened it expecting more trouble, but found David Chen from the State Environmental Protection Agency standing on my porch with 2 cups of coffee and a briefcase full of documents. "Thought you might need this," he said, handing me one of the cups. The steam rose between us in the cool morning air, mixing with the scent of pine and dew-soaked grass. "You guys start early. When we're chasing a conspiracy this big, we don't really stop." He gestured toward my kitchen table. "Mind if we sit? What I'm about to show you is going to change everything you think you know about this case." Chen spread out a map of the county, marked with red X's and development zones. Willowbrook's projects covered nearly 30 square miles, but the pattern wasn't random. See these areas? He pointed to the marked zones. Every single one sits on what geologists call premium aquifer access points. We're talking about underground water rights worth hundreds of millions of dollars. I studied the map more closely. My neighborhood sat right in the center of the largest concentration of X marks. Water rights? Climate change is making water the new oil, Alex. Whoever controls these aquifer access points controls the water supply for 3 counties. Willowbrook isn't just building luxury housing developments. He pulled out another document. Corporate filings, partnership agreements, investment prospectuses. They're building a private water distribution network. Housing developments are just the cover story. The pieces click together with terrifying clarity. The manufactured eagle crisis wasn't about property values or community safety. It was about clearing residents off land that sat on top of liquid gold. How many people are we talking about? 47 families in your immediate area. Over 300 across all their target zones. Chen's expression was grim. And they've been using the same playbook everywhere. Manufactured crises, fake legal actions, professional intimidation. The fake federal agents weren't just trying to remove my eagles. They were field testing their system. If they could make it work against someone with your technical background, they could make it work against anyone. My phone buzzed with a text message. Rita from the Wildlife Center. Emergency meeting at City Hall, 1 hour. They're trying to overturn the eagle protection status. Chen looked at the message over my shoulder. That's impossible. Federal wildlife protection can't be overturned by local government. Unless they claim the original placement was fraudulent, I said, understanding dawning like a cold sunrise. If they can prove the eagles were placed illegally, the protection disappears. And then there's nothing stopping them from bulldozing every tree, every nest site, every trace of wildlife habitat in the entire area. We drove to City Hall in Chen's government sedan, past protesters holding signs I now recognized as professionally made. Stop government overreach and property rights matter. The same faces from the fake crowd at my house, plus a few dozen more. Inside the council chamber, the scene was chaos. Karen Wilcox sat at the petitioner's table with a new lawyer, not Marcus Steele, who was presumably still in county lockup, but a woman in an expensive suit who radiated competence and cold calculation. Mayor Patricia Hendricks called for order with her gavel. We're here to consider Emergency Ordinance 47C, which would declare the federal wildlife placement at 847 Maple Street invalid due to procedural violations. I stood up in the gallery. What procedural violations? The new lawyer, her nameplate read Elizabeth Morrison-esque, rose smoothly. The federal placement was requested by an individual with undisclosed financial conflicts of interest. She gestured toward me like I was evidence in a criminal case. Mr. River failed to disclose that he has active contracts with environmental monitoring organizations, creating a financial incentive to maintain wildlife habitat on his property. The accusation hit like a physical blow. Yes, I had a cybersecurity contract with the Sierra Club's fraud detection unit, a tiny part of my income, monitoring their donation processing systems for security breaches. That's a cybersecurity contract, I protested. It has nothing to do with eagles. Financial conflict is financial conflict, Morrison replied smoothly. Federal placement requires complete disclosure of all environmental affiliations. Chen leaned forward in his seat beside me. That's not how federal wildlife law works. But Morrison was already presenting her next piece of evidence. Furthermore, photographic analysis reveals that the alleged aggressive behavior images were indeed taken before the bird's arrival. But they were taken by Mr. River himself as part of an elaborate fraud to create artificial justification for the federal placement. She clicked through a PowerPoint presentation showing metadata analysis of the fake photos, analysis that looked remarkably similar to my own work, but with conclusions twisted into their opposite. Mr. River used his technical expertise to stage the entire crisis, then positioned himself as the victim when his own manufactured evidence was discovered. The room erupted in murmurs. I felt the walls closing in as Morrison systematically destroyed my credibility with my own evidence, perverted into a weapon against me. That's insane, I said, standing up. I exposed those photos as fakes. After using them to justify the federal placement in the first place, Morrison countered. Creating both the problem and the solution is a classic fraud technique. Mayor Hendricks banged her gavel. "Mr. River, please remain seated." Chen stood up beside me. "Your Honor, I'm David Chen, with the State Environmental Protection Agency. This entire proceeding is based on fabricated evidence and fraudulent legal theories. Do you have documentation to support that claim?" Chen started to reach for his briefcase, then stopped. His face went pale as he stared at something behind me. I turned around. 2 men in federal marshal uniforms were walking down the aisle toward us. "David Chen, you're under arrest for abuse of federal authority and conspiracy to defraud local government." The handcuffs clicked around Chen's wrists with a sound like breaking bones. As they led him away, he managed to whisper in my ear, "The briefcase. Don't let them get the briefcase." But it was too late. Elizabeth Morrison was already collecting Chen's documents, sliding them into her own leather portfolio with the efficiency of someone who'd planned this exact sequence of events. "Your Honor," Morrison addressed the mayor, "in light of the ongoing federal investigation into environmental fraud, we request immediate passage of Emergency Ordinance 47C. All in favor?" 4 hands went up immediately. The 5th councilman, an older guy I recognized from my neighborhood, hesitated. "Dave," Mayor Hendricks prompted, "your vote." Councilman Dave Patterson looked directly at me. His weathered face showed the same expression I'd seen on Jim Collins, a man who understood he was being asked to participate in something fundamentally wrong. I abstain. Motion carries, 4-1. Emergency Ordinance 47C is hereby enacted. Federal wildlife protections for 847 Maple Street are suspended pending resolution of the fraud investigation. Outside the courthouse, Rita waited by my car with tears in her eyes. "They're coming for the Eagles at sunrise tomorrow. Full removal team. Legitimate federal warrants this time." I looked up at the sky where thick clouds were building toward what looked like a storm. "How long do we have?" 12 hours, maybe less. That's when I realized I was still holding Chen's briefcase. In all the chaos of his arrest, nobody had noticed me pick it up from under his chair. I popped it open right there in the courthouse parking lot. Financial records, property deeds, corporate documents, and a USB drive labeled Insurance Policy. "Rita, I need you to trust me one more time." "What do you need?" I held up the USB drive. 12 hours to prove that everything they just did in that courtroom was orchestrated by the same people who've been trying to steal my land from the beginning. And if you can't? The first drops of rain started falling, warm and heavy, carrying the smell of ozone and approaching thunder. Then tomorrow morning, they win everything. The USB drive contained everything: corporate bank transfers, encrypted emails, audio recordings of phone calls, between Elizabeth Morrison and Willowbrook executives. David Chen hadn't just been investigating environmental fraud. He'd been building a federal racketeering case. I spent the night in my basement, rain hammering against the small windows while I worked through Chen's files. The storm outside matched the chaos in my head as I pieced together the full scope of what I was fighting. Willowbrook wasn't just a development company. They were a front operation for something much larger. A consortium of water rights speculators, defense contractors, and political operatives who'd perfected the art of legal theft. The fake federal agents, the manufactured crisis, Elizabeth Morrison's courtroom performance, it was all theater, professional-grade psychological warfare designed to make ordinary people give up their land without a fight. But Chen had recorded everything. Phone calls where Morrison discussed neutralizing the environmental angle, financial transfers showing payments to the fake HOA members, audio of Marcus Steele briefing his team on Operation Clean Sweep, their internal code name for clearing residents off aquifer sites. By 4 a.m., I had enough evidence to bury them all. The question was whether I could get anyone to listen before sunrise. I called Sheriff Tom Bradley's personal cell phone. "Alex, do you know what time it is?" "Tom, I need 5 minutes. Just 5 minutes to show you something that's going to blow this case wide open." The exhaustion in my voice must have convinced him. "Come to the station, back entrance." 20 minutes later, I was sitting in Tom's office with Chen's files spread across his desk. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead while Tom listened to the audio recordings, his expression growing darker with each revelation. Hey, Jesus Christ, Alex. This is conspiracy to commit fraud on a massive scale. It gets worse. I showed him the water rights documentation. They're not just stealing land, they're stealing the underground water supply for 3 counties. Tom picked up his desk phone. I'm calling the FBI. No time, the Eagles get removed at sunrise. Once that happens, they'll clear-cut the entire area and destroy any remaining evidence. So what do you want me to do? I pulled up the final file on Chen's USB drive. A detailed operations plan, complete with personnel assignments and timeline coordinates. The real federal wildlife removal team isn't scheduled until Monday. Whoever shows up at my house this morning is another fake crew. Tom studied the documents. You want me to arrest them? I want you to be there with cameras rolling when they try to impersonate federal officers again. Dawn came gray and wet, with the storm still spitting rain across the neighborhood. I stood at my kitchen window, watching 3 black SUVs pull up to my driveway at exactly 6 a.m. The crew that got out looked more professional than the fake agents from before. Better uniforms, more convincing badges, equipment that actually looked federal issue. But Chen's files had prepared me for this escalation. Tom's cruiser was parked 2 blocks away, along with a van from Channel 7 News. Rita stood on my front porch, officially representing the Wildlife Rehabilitation Center as a witness to whatever was about to happen. The lead agent, a woman this time, mid-40s with the bearing of someone who'd actually served in government, approached with paperwork in hand. Mr. River, I'm Agent Sarah Kozlov, Federal Wildlife Service. We have a removal order for the protected birds on this property. Can I see your identification? She handed me a badge that looked perfect. If I hadn't known better, I would have believed it completely. Agent Kozlov, can you tell me the federal case number for this removal order? A moment's hesitation. That's classified operational information. No, it's not. I pulled out my phone, opened the federal wildlife database that I'd accessed dozens of times over the past week. Federal removal orders are public record. The case number should be right here. I showed her the empty search results. No removal order, no operational activity. No Agent Sarah Kozlov in the federal employee directory. Sir, you need to step back and allow us to perform our duties. That's when Tom's cruiser pulled up, followed by the news van. Rita had her camera phone out, live streaming everything to the Wildlife Center's social media accounts. Ma'am, I'm Sheriff Bradley. I need to verify your federal credentials. Agent Kozlov reached for her radio. This is Kozlov. We have local interference with a federal operation. Ma'am, please step away from the radio. Tom's hand moved to his weapon. You're under arrest for impersonating a federal officer. What happened next was different from the amateur hour performance earlier in the week. This crew was professional. They had backup plans, communication protocols, extraction procedures. But they weren't expecting what I did next. I pulled out a megaphone I'd borrowed from the fire department and activated Chen's audio files at maximum volume. Elizabeth Morrison's voice boomed across the neighborhood. The Eagles are just cover story. Once we clear the residents, we control the water rights for the entire aquifer. Then Marcus Steele. Phase 3 involves permanent removal of all environmental obstacles, wildlife, habitats, and any residents who won't relocate voluntarily. The fake agents froze as their own recorded voices played their operational briefings for the entire neighborhood to hear. The Channel 7 reporter was capturing everything. Rita's live stream had attracted over 2,000 viewers. My neighbors started coming out of their houses, finally understanding what they'd really been part of. That's our voices, one of the fake agents said to his partner. How did he get our voices? I held up Chen's USB drive. Your own security briefings, recorded by a federal investigator you thought you'd neutralized. By 10 a.m., it was over. The fake agents were in custody. Elizabeth Morrison had been arrested at her law office. Willowbrook Development's assets were frozen, pending a federal racketeering investigation. The Eagles sat peacefully in their oak tree, watching the human drama resolve itself below. But the real victory came later that afternoon, when I got a call from the County Water Authority. Mr. River, we understand you've uncovered irregularities in water rights speculation in your area. We'd like to discuss establishing a permanent conservation easement for your property and the surrounding aquifer zone. I was sitting on my back porch, watching the Eagles hunt for fish in the pond behind my house, when Jim Collins walked over with 2 beers. Hell of a thing, Alex. Yeah, hell of a thing. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the eagles call to each other in the gathering dusk. "You going to stay?" Jim asked. I pulled out my old programmer's badge and looked at it in the fading light. For the first time in years, it didn't feel like a reminder of everything I'd lost. It felt like a symbol of everything I was capable of protecting. "Yeah, Jim, I'm going to stay." The water rights easement would pay me enough to quit corporate consulting and focus on environmental cybersecurity full-time. The eagles had a permanent protected habitat, and my neighbors finally understood that some fights are worth having, even when they seem impossible to win. Especially then. As the sun set behind the oak tree, I heard Sarah's voice in my memory one more time. Not the bitter words from our divorce, but something she'd said years earlier when we were still happy. "You're most dangerous when you're protecting something you love." She'd been right about that too. The eagles called again in the darkness, wild and free and exactly where they belonged. Just like me.